Welcome to the Purple Sky Thinking for Leaders podcast. This podcast is for you if you lead people, teams, or the organisation. You might be a leader or a manager yourself, or you might be part of the support team to help those people to be really successful. I'm Anwen Bottois. I'm the leadership success coach and founder of Purple Sky Consulting, and I'm going to be the host for this podcast. My mission is to help as many leaders as possible to really love what they do. I want to help you to feel more confident, more capable, more effective, so that you can build and grow happy, healthy, more successful teams. This podcast is going to be all about helping you to love leading. We are going to be exploring topics and themes about leading in a way that will help you in your day-to-day, but also support your continuous development.
Hello, and welcome to this new episode of Purple Sky Thinking for Leaders. In this episode, I'm talking to Michelle Hartley from People Sorted. Michelle, as she calls it, is a HR lifer and has now been developing her own business supporting HR leaders to go from beige to brilliant. And she is fabulous, and I'm really delighted that she is joining me on the pod to talk to you. What we're going to be talking about today is the value for you as a leader of having a brilliant relationship with your HR team, your HR partners, how that can benefit you, and how you can go about building that relationship to benefit the both of you. So I hope you'll find this really useful. And if you've got any questions or you want to get in touch with either of us, please do comment or get in touch with us via LinkedIn. Here goes. We are going to get straight into it. So I am going to hand over to Michelle. Welcome, Michelle. It's really lovely to have you here with us. So quick intro from your perspective. What would you like our listeners to know about you? And tell us a little bit about your history as well and what you do now.
Cool. Thank you. Thanks for having me. I'm really excited. I feel like it's been a long time coming as well. We've been trying to organise this, so I'm glad we're finally here. So I am Michelle Hartley. I run my own business called People Sorted. I basically transform HR teams from beige to brilliant. That's the easiest summary I could ever possibly give. With a side swipe summary of I slay death by PowerPoint training. Or I slay death by, no, do I? Do I? Yeah, I do. I slay death by PowerPoint training. Why am I questioning myself? That's of course what I do.
Don't question it.
Why am I questioning myself? So that's essentially what I do. But basically, I bring fun back to HR and back to training. My history is a long time in HR, and also I'm an HR lifer, which feels like a rarity these days. I don't know if you found that, Anwen, but like, people tend to fall into HR, don't they? Like, oh, I was doing cleaning and they gave me HR. Or I was doing like marketing and HR fell into my lap. But I am an HR lifer. I've always kind of been in and around HR and L&D. So I've always wanted that. I had my first job was in Pizza Hut. So my career started with cheese on toast. And I loved it so much. And I attended some awesome training with them. And I just loved it. And this trainer was just the most like vivacious, hilarious, knowledgeable human. And I remember going up to her at the end and saying like, this is amazing. Like, how do you do this for a job? And so she was like, oh, I'm an area trainer and I do this and that. So it was just then it just started. And then I realized that people do this thing for a living and it's called HR. So then I kind of started I feel like I left Pizza Hut with my little knapsack on my back and just went off into the real world. And then I literally went straight in. Yeah. Skipping along in this road paved with gold. And so I started then straight into an HR job. But interestingly, my first HR job was HR plus marketing. So it's for the public sector and I didn't have the funds for a whole human in a job. So I was half marketing and half HR. And I feel like that like pivotal formative role has literally influenced everything that I've ever done because I love like comms and visual stuff. And, you know, even in corporate life, I loved making infographics and, you know, never did a boring report. There was always something fun about it. And I feel like that literally like imprinted on me and that's stuck with me ever since. So
getting to know you over the last year or so, that makes so much sense that your background has had that marketing part of it to start with as well, which is so cool. So for those who have got to know me over time, I love a bit of travel. So next question for you is, where is your favourite travel or holiday destination?
Oh, do you know what? I'm going to go and I'm going to say the Maldives. And I've been so lucky to have been there twice. Genuinely, I think it was my first ever like holiday experience. When I got off the plane, I wanted to cry. Like, it was the most beautiful place I've ever been in my life. Like, it looks like everywhere you look, it's like a postcard. Like, the sea is beautiful. There's tropical fish swimming around. Like, the food is amazing. People are lovely. Like, oh. So if I could literally wave a magic wand and have any holiday again, it would be the Maldives. Just the most beautiful place ever.
That sounds amazing. That sounds totally amazing. It is high on our list of places to get to because we've not been to the Maldives. So I'm really looking forward to that. I will definitely take that as a recommendation. Right.
Yes.
Tell me about your leadership experience. What's been your view and your involvement in terms of kind of that leadership aspect rather than just looking at it from a HR perspective?
That's another interesting one, actually, because it started at Pizza Hut. So I worked my way up from like waiting tables to then being like a shift manager, they called it. So somebody that just ran the shift as it went, and then a deputy manager, and then an area trainer. And so that started really early. So that was like early 20s. Then I had my time kind of focusing being an HR pro standalone in a lot of places. And then ended up in my last few roles working with an HR team. So worked in both hospitality, in engineering, and in manufacturing, in leadership positions. And actually that experience, and I'm wondering if you had the same, but in that experience was often, the only woman in the leadership team, or the only woman in a senior position. And I often worked, or I was going to say like found myself, but often worked in like male dominated environments. And so there were kind of almost like layers of kind of battles and challenges that happened throughout. So that's my kind of leadership base. I mean, I worked in like supported, I guess, other countries as well in my last role. So supported other professionals in Canada, the US, America. I said the US, Canada, US, Australia, and China. So worked, across the globe, looking at different cultures and different HR applications. So yeah, it's been a really good experience in terms of that leadership space.
Fantastic. And what was the biggest challenge or learning point you discovered about yourself from that leadership experience?
Oh my word. Do you know what? I was saying this in a coaching session with a coachee yesterday. Like, people management is shit, isn't it? People management is really hard. And I think that's what I learned. And I was laughing because I was saying throughout my entire career as an HR pro, all I wanted to do is manage a team, have a team, be a leader. And when I got there, I was like, this is rubbish. It's really hard work to like engage, motivate, connect with the team. And so I feel like that was the biggest learn, actually, was, do you know what? You can't just go in and do one size fits all. You have to really, and I'm a massive fan of the situational leadership model because of that. But I think you have to almost like know your team, know yourself, and then be able to kind of connect the two. So I think that's probably my biggest learn. So I think when I was younger in my career, I was like, I want to be a manager and I can do all the things and I can tell people what to do. And actually, probably the largest percentage of my role was not telling people what to do, was persuading and influencing people to do the right things. So yeah, that's probably my biggest learn, I think.
I mean, I love that honesty as well of that perspective on it as well, because I think the biggest learning point I had when I moved between leadership roles was how bloody hard it was. And I spent 15 years before that kind of like helping leaders to get better at it, and often getting quite bloody frustrated, quite honestly, about them maybe not handling something quite right. And then you're like, when you start doing it for yourself, it really does give you a bit of a reality check of, actually, this is really bloody hard. And we need to help leaders, managers to do that as best as they can. And I think you're right about that point of, how do you help people as individuals be leaders? And so you can't like blueprint it necessarily. It's about the individual scenarios and teams. So I think that's a really great shout.
Yeah, it's really interesting.
So the reason I brought you on today as the pro within HR, but also moving HR from beige to brilliant, which you certainly do bring that. I know from my own experiences as an HR practitioner, I was one of those lifers as well. When I had a really strong relationship with business leaders, the leadership teams I was working with, I felt the difference that it made to the quality of our outputs as a team and just generally how I felt as well in the job, actually. Talk to me a little bit about your perspective in terms of the benefits that leaders can get from having a great relationship with their HR partner.
Yes, I love this. It's really interesting, isn't it? Because I've worked with leaders across a kind of spectrum, I guess. And actually, one of the favourite models that I talk about a lot is the Paul Kearns HR maturity model. I don't know if you've seen it, but it's like a 4-box model where it's got the CEO maturity up the side and then HR maturity along the bottom. And actually, that perfect fit is when you've got a mature CEO that understands the power of HR and you've got a mature HR that understands the power of HR, and they work together to deliver something awesome. And it was only when I discovered that model, which was only like, I don't know, 5 years ago or 6 years ago or something, that I genuinely realised like that's where all my frustrations have come in, because I'd either be working with an immature HR team who didn't really understand how HR functioned, or I'd be working with an immature leader or a set of leaders that didn't understand what HR was there to do. So I guess the benefits of having a really good connection with your HR business partner is stuff gets done. Stuff gets done. You get a really good connection to what is going on in the business. You get a finger on the pulse, because let's be real, HR knows everything. So you get a good sense of finger on the pulse of. And in my experience, when I've had that connection and almost like that level of, I guess it's trust and autonomy, actually, but that trust and autonomy, I've been able to drive massive change in the organisation, performance delivery, revenue turnover, profits, finding the right people for the right roles, all that great stuff all feeds into having a much more connected and profitable business. So I think there's so many things, and you'll know this because you're an HR human like me, but there's so many things that go into that like black box of HR, aren't there? Like good HR people, stuff goes in, and then magically business performance comes out the other end. But that's those benefits, right? We can increase engagement, we can make you a great strategy, we can deliver connection to your business plan. So instead of it coming through 5 senior leaders' heads, it comes through your headcount, and so everybody knows and delivers the business plan. We connect people to strategy, the organisation, their teams, their leadership, their peers. That's what we do. And I on my programme I talk about what HR strategy is, because we all think, oh, it's this big sexy thing, like, oh my God, I'm not strategic enough. Actually, my take is, if you're strategic in your HR role, you're making connections, and that is the job, right? So if you've got a good relationship with your HR person, you are both making connections. So people to business, teams to the business, teams to their teams, managers to their teams, managers to their purpose, organisation back to its purpose. All of that stuff is what we do. We drive and make connections. So I guess the short answer to your question is, be friends with your HR partner and your business will get better.
And that is a beautiful summary. And you touched on some of the, that connection piece. I think you're absolutely right. The relationship is so important. And, quite honestly, they get to work with awesome people when they work with brilliant HR pros anyway. So what a great benefit just on that basis. Alongside the connection piece, what do you think the other things our leaders should expect from really great HR business partners?
I think, certainly in my experience, is being able to have almost like that step back. So for me, what I was able to do often in the organisations that I've worked in is to kind of step back and just look at the whole of the business, where other functions, like sales, like finance, like IT, like marketing, all of those other service functions into the business don't do that. They're buried in their silos often, and for the right reasons. They're very focused on their part of the pie. But actually, for HR, what we give to them is this kind of overseeing, stepped back, wide view on your organisation, and I don't think anybody else in those functions has that in the same way. And so I think that's the biggest bit for me, is seeing the organisation holistically and almost seeing it as like a set of levers that you can kind of pull on to get something else out the other end. And I just don't think other like leadership functions in an organisation have that, and that's kind of the magic of the HR bit, I think.
I think that's a really, really valid point, that kind of holistic kind of world view of what's going on in the organisation, because quite often as HR partners we are in those different parts of the business as well. So although we might specialise looking after a business area, the way the team connects across the organisation gives a different opportunity in that way. And building on that, I think, I don't know what your thoughts are on this, but a key thing I would see was being able to have that holistic view, have those connections, and then be able to have a really honest, open, challenging, sometimes conversation, but also being able to provide support, love, care, and attention as well, which actually sometimes when you're in a leadership role, you can be quite vulnerable and it can be quite challenging. And therefore, actually, your HR partner, if they're a great HR partner, should be your buddy, should be your pal. Absolutely.
Yes. Go to sounding board. You know, I'd often say, like, you want to come in and rant, this is the place to do it. Like, just come in, let off steam, let's have a chat about it.
Safe.
And I think that then feeds into, you know, creating that safe space then feeds into being able to solve the bloody problems, because if you hear it all, you can help with the problem solving. Whereas if you don't have that relationship and that connection, you can only help in the proportion they let you see. And that is often then not a good solution because you're not seeing the whole thing. So yeah, you're completely right.
And that's always where it goes pear-shaped, isn't it? Where you're only either getting a microcosm of the actual truth of what's happening, or you're not getting shared with at all as an HR partner. And that would always be the bit that I'd be like kicking myself afterwards of like, where is my relationship with this person that I didn't know about this thing on the you know, what is it I need to learn from that as well? It's not just, and quite often, you know, sometimes I'd be like, why haven't they bloody told me anything yet? And it's like, well, what have I been doing that's meant that that's not come to me yet as well? So I think it's really important that as HR pros, we take our own responsibility within that relationship as well.
Yeah, I do agree with you. I think there's often like an element of HR ranting, isn't there? Like, why didn't they tell me these things? Why didn't you come to me sooner? Blah, blah, blah. And actually, I think you're right. You know, we need to also reflect on what our part of that has been. And one of the things I talk about a lot is go out and connect to your organization, whether that is, and we used to call them commercial days in my team, but, you know, go out and get seen in the organization, be visible, go and see your senior leaders in the place that they live, you know, go and see them in those offices, those meetings, go to the team meetings. You know, a lot of HR people have said to me, for example, like, I'm not going to go to that team meeting. They don't need me. I'm just going to dial in. I'm like, you are missing out on some fantastic coffee conversations. You're missing out on the wine the night before. You're missing out on the drinks before they all hit the train. Like, all of that stuff is really important. And if you don't consider that, you're missing a massive trick in terms of, you know, understanding what's going on really with that team in that organization. And I like wine.
Because that's the difference between... and you like wine, obviously, and that's the difference between a tactical, operational experience and relationship, and the connected relationship that allows you to then pick up on the nuance, pick on where understand where the relationships are across this team, and actually how is that impacting already on certain things that are going on and the success for that senior leader in that team. So, yeah, I think you're right. I think we've got to show up in the right way, haven't we? So if we're thinking about it because we're obviously talking to leaders here today as part of this podcast, what tips would you have for them in terms of taking action on building that relationship and seeking out that brilliant HR relationship?
Yes. You know what? I think there's a few bits in here. So remembering that your HR partner is also a human being is important. So talking to them in a human way is important. And I also think, you know, that goes both ways. Often HR will think leadership aren't humans either. So I think there's a two-way piece in there. I also think, like, go and like seek advice from them on stuff that you might even know the answer to, but get a perspective. So use them as a sounding board, use them for perspective. You know, HR people are really frustrated business people because we often don't get included, or we you know, it comes to us when it's already ruined. You know, we're trying to then, my phrase is unfuck. We're trying to then unfuck something that has happened. But what's really important is, you know, going to them early doors, having that conversation, using them as a sounding board. You know, really starting to build that relationship is just so important. And inviting them to, you know, your meetings, your away days, your get-togethers, your Zoom chats, you know, all of those things are really powerful and important. And if you've got the right HR person, they will come and connect that. And I also think if you're ever in this glorious space where you get to recruit an HR person, and you're a leader that's got a stakeholder relationship in there, is really think about what you want as your business partner. It's not just policies and process and the law. It is about, are they passionate about your business? Will they help you to understand your challenges? Will they come in and problem solve for you when you've got a massive issue? That kind of thing. So, if you're lucky enough to be able to recruit an HR person, really think about what you want from them in and what you can see in an interview of that, but what you really want from them in terms of, the best scenario, I think.
I think that's a really interesting way of looking at that in terms of getting involved, but also shaping it. Shaping that relationship. You are going to get as much out of shaping that as the HR person is shaping the relationship with you. It pays off. It totally pays off.
Exactly.
Have you got, because I have seen many of these relationships over time, so it'd be really interesting to get your take on it, where the relationship doesn't work. What are your thoughts or tips in terms of when you're realising, actually, my relationship with my HR key contact isn't working for either of us? What would be your thoughts on how to unstick that?
Yeah, it's a really good question. And it happens so often. A lot of the time, I'm on the other side of it. So I'm often talking to HR people about when their leadership relationship doesn't work. So it's really interesting to think of it from this side. I mean, my initial take is I'm always, a fan of having a genuine conversation with a human being. So often, what I would do, and this did happen to me a number of times, I'd say, come on then, let's go and grab a coffee. Let's just go and grab lunch, somewhere not in either one of our power bases. So let's grab a coffee at the M62 services. Let's go and grab a Starbucks up the road. Yes, but it makes such a difference. So try and think about a way in which you can have a relatively open conversation about what's going on in a neutral space and make that, as informal as you need it to be. So a lunch, a coffee, a whatever. And I think have a cards on the table conversation in a nice way. You can do that without it feeling, aggressive or accusatory. You can say, this feels hard. Why does it feel hard? What's really happening here? Talk to me about what barriers we've got, because, this is what I need. And this is what I think you need, and having that conversation can be really, really powerful. And making sure that that not everybody's going to love you as a leader or an HR person. And actually, maybe it doesn't need to be perfect, but you do need to find whatever this working common ground is. And often, with HR pros, we have a responsibility outside of what you see. Often, unless we're talking to the CEO here, we are often looking at a number of different business units. We're looking at a number of different leaders. We have our own team to consider. We are thinking about comms. We have our own projects that might come from group if you're in part of a bigger group. So often, just asking that question, like, are you okay? How are you? What's going on here? Tell me about what's on your timeline at the moment. You'll get some interesting stuff. So there might be other things that are influencing it, and it might not be about you as a leader. So I think they're probably my biggest tips: offsite, neutral conversations, and ask how they are.
Wonderful. I think that's so useful. There's a deliberateness in taking that approach, isn't there? And have you ever had a conversation about what you need from each other? And if you haven't, have that conversation. It might be you've both got different expectations of each other and it's not working. So have that open conversation. And if that means you need a level of contracting to kind of reestablish what you need and start building that confidence in each other and trust in each other, it definitely can come, but it will pay off big time when you get there. So, wonderful. Michelle, thank you so much for joining us. I think that was such a really interesting look at that relationship between leadership teams and HR, and actually the benefits and huge value there is to the organisation of getting that right, but also just as you as a normal human leader, get this right and it will pay off for you. So hopefully we've given you some really useful insights there. Where can people find you, Michelle? Where's the best way for them to find your contents or insights about you?
Yeah, no, love this, because that I love to muck about on LinkedIn. So I'm on LinkedIn. My current URL is Michelle Hartley, Finder of Awesome. You can also find me on my website, which is people.
Fantastic. So big thank you for you being here today. I really appreciate it. definitely go and look Michelle up, and hopefully we'll invite you back on at another point at some time. So thank you so much for being here.
I'd love to. Thank you so much for having me. It's been brilliant.
A big thank you from me for you joining us for this episode, and a huge thank you to Michelle Hartley for giving her insight and sharing her tips about developing a brilliant relationship with your HR partner. I hope you found that useful. If you've got any questions or any thoughts about the episode, please do get in touch and you can comment below. I'll also share some links for how you can contact Michelle.
And finally, thank you for joining this episode of the Purple Sky Thinking for Leaders podcast. You'll find all the resources and the links that we mentioned down in the show notes. If you love this episode, why not share it with somebody else in a leadership role who you think would find this useful? If you haven't already, I'd love for you to subscribe so that you never miss an episode. And if we've earned it, why not leave us a 5-star review? I'm Anwen, your host, and I look forward to welcoming you back to the Purple Sky Thinking for Leaders podcast very soon. Bye for now.